Thanks very much. Thank you, everyone, for coming here today. Delighted to be here at Norwich Games Festival talking about esports. I'd love to get a show of hands from you in the audience here. This will go out on YouTube afterwards, I'm told, as well. Who is interested in esports? Who's heard of esports, is interested in it? So most people in the audience, keep your hand raised if you're interested in working in esports and getting a job in esports. There's quite a few as well. So hopefully we'll inspire you today and give you that information that will really help you, right? And you'll find it valuable. So first of all, I'll introduce myself. My name's Dom Sacco. I'm the editor of, I used to be the editor of Esports News UK, a site I set up 10 years ago. I've just sold that recently and planning on writing a book about UK esports soon as well. But I've seen all the ups and downs of esports in the UK. I've got a fantastic panel here, which I'll go through shortly. There it is there. Now, we have had a dropout today. Callum, who's the founder of a great esports organisation in the UK, SAF Esports, had to drop out, unfortunately, but we've got the wonderful Gregan here sitting to my right, who's stepped in. I'd love for you guys to introduce yourselves, first of all. Tell us a bit about your background and what you do in esports, or what you've done in esports in the past.
Hi guys, I actually messaged Dom to find out if I could come on this panel because I love doing anything Dom gets involved in. So in a nice way, I'm glad this happened. But I've been involved in esports for about 9-10 years. Started out commentating and then started getting into coaching a lot more. And I coached Team Vitality during 2018-2019 when we became the world champions in Rocket League. And then I spent a lot of time with Guild Esports, building out the Rocket League project there. And then I've sort of helped out various different esports teams across all sorts of different regions with coaching consultancy, and then commentated the RLCS Worlds and many other games as well. And I now currently do Pokemon.
Hi, I'm Harry Chapman, also known online probably as Hazza JC. I'm an esports commentator, and I put host, but it's been a while. It's been a while since I was hosting. So mostly right now, you'd probably see me on Valorant. Most recently, I worked VCT EMEA Stage 1 in Berlin, which was an amazing experience. Great to be a part of that. But for the most part, in esports, I've been active for 5 years now, I guess. Right, I started in 2020, one of those pandemic babies when it comes to esports. But I didn't really do much after my first show. Waited like a year, and then really got stuck in and have sort of taken it from there. And now I'm full time. So yeah, it's been one hell of a ride.
Hiya, I'm Joe Brady. I'm an esports photographer. I've been shooting events for, goodness, I think my first esports event was 2014. So yeah, over 10 years. I don't know where the time's gone, which is quite terrifying, to be honest. I'm used to being on the other side of the camera, so this is a bit strange for me, but it's cool. And I've worked on events all over the world for clients like EFG, ESL, MLG, like Riot Games, Blast. Basically every game you can name I've shot, basically. So yeah, I was at the Pokemon event. The Gregan was there. Yeah, so and I just got back from DreamHack in Dallas like 2 days ago, so that was really cool. And I really enjoy working in esports, and it's good fun.
All right, here we go. I'm Leyna, or Affinity again with Hazza. We've got a lot of talent up here today, so I do mostly Counter-Strike, do a little bit of Valorant as well, hosting and casting, again hosting. Not got much of an opportunity to flex that one recently, there's not much work in it, but love it to pieces, it's where I started. I'm also soon to be graduating from a university esports course, so I can bring that sort of element of the academics and the facilities available on that side. I mostly do shooter games, and also here for a little bit of Pokemon. I don't really involve myself in the esports scene too much, but I know it's a little bit of a nerdy panel. I feel like this is going to get brought up more than one occasion. But and I can also provide a little bit of insight from the diversity and inclusion side of esports at the moment, because it's a big hot topic, and I feel quite qualified in that sense. But looking forward to being here and such an amazing panel.
We opened some Pokemon packs, didn't we? Some digital ones you asked us to open beforehand. Now, a bit about myself. So I've worked in journalism pretty much all my life, the past couple of decades. Is there anyone here interested in working in journalism or content creation, YouTube, streaming, so on. So there's a couple. And I do think, I'll come on to this, but there's a lot of crossover between journalism. A lot of YouTubers actually do journalism. And if there's people in the audience thinking, what is journalism? Writing news, what's going on, current events, maybe interviews, content. But I think the lines between journalism and general content have really blurred in recent years. And I have to say, as a journalist who sits behind the computers typing, and, you know, I don't get on a microphone too much, it is quite intimidating having a panel full of excellent speakers and commentators and everything, but I'll do my best. So a little bit on journalism, my background. I grew up, and this shows my age a little bit here, reading games magazines, Nintendo Official Magazine, Games Master, you know, computer and video games, all those old magazines. Back in my day, we didn't have YouTube and Twitch and all of that stuff when I was a youngster. Games magazines where you got all your information, reviews, cheats, you know, anything, news and stuff like that. So I read hundreds of games magazines, and I ended up doing work experience at Nintendo magazine. And yeah, if there's anyone here who wants to get started in esports, making contacts, making connections is so important, because they sometimes say it's not what you know, it's who you know. I think it's a bit of both, right? You need the skills, you need you need the practice, and it's great to do university courses. We'll come on to this later on. You know, yeah, maybe you don't need a degree to get a job in esports, but for me, having a degree really helped. The same applies for journalism. You don't need a degree to go into content creation, but there are a lot of good courses cropping up now around video editing, you know, camera work, that kind of stuff. So yeah, I managed to do work experience at Nintendo Official Magazine. We've got a picture here. So that is me back then. I did used to have hair, believe it or not. And that's back at Nintendo Magazine back in, goodness, probably late 90s. You've got, if you eagle-eyed viewers, you'll see there's a Nintendo 64 there, really old, ancient games console, fantastic console. Back then, they didn't have, you know, the internet or streaming and things like that. You had to connect the Nintendo 64 to a old PC and then take screenshots and video that way, and then you'd write about it. But just going to the Nintendo magazine that day, I was too young to have work experience. They said, "Oh, come round and we'll show you, give you a tour of the office." You know, reach out to organisations. A lot of the time they'll be friendly, they'll be happy to message you back. And my dad took me and we asked them, "What do you need to, how can you get a job here?" And they said, "Well, you can go to university. You don't need to, but we recommend it." And that's what I did. I've studied journalism at university, and it'd be good to get the views of the panel as well. But a lot of people in esports say, if you want to work in marketing in esports, go and get a marketing degree. You know, if you want to work in management and manage teams, go and get a business management degree or whatever else. If you want to be a coach, learn about coaching and mentoring and so on. So I did the work experience there. I went to Bournemouth University, studied journalism. No games magazines were hiring at the time when I graduated, so I got a job at Auto Trader of all places, and I still don't know how. I don't know anything about cars, but it shows you, right? If you've got that energy and that drive, and yeah, in the interviews, I don't know much about cars, but I'm happy to learn. Cut my teeth in journalism there for 2 years, and then I managed to get into a games magazine called MCV, like an industry magazine. Then I just sort of worked my way up, and around 2015, I saw esports. I took a great interest in that, and I saw it was getting bigger and bigger, and I had a little games blog at the time, and I decided to rebrand it and start writing about UK sports, the ESL UK Premiership in League of Legends. Then I branched out into other sports like Rocket League. I've written about Gregan. I've written about these panellists quite a bit over the years, and it's been great. So anyway, enough about me. We're going to talk about, first of all, you know, a little bit of the background of each person on this panel and how they have, you know, got to where they are today, and a bit about what they're doing. Obviously, we don't have your pictures up because you're a last minute addition, but we've got Hazza here first. So Hazza, maybe you want to tell us a bit about you know, what you're doing in these pictures, and you know, your co-commentator and how that all works, how you got into it, maybe, and maybe some of your favorite memories.
Yeah, do you want to start with the Batman origin story, or do we? Yeah, okay, all right. So, in terms of how I got into esports, I think I'm glad that you mentioned the university aspect there, because I studied at university, but like you mentioned, I studied history, and that history degree has not exactly been put to use. Let's just say that, right? So, yeah, I started through the university scene. The first broadcast I ever did was UK Valorant, which was when the beta of Valorant literally just came out. And that was, back in 2020, right? And that's the one broadcast that I did. First broadcast I did, it was Sue hosting, right? Yinsu. And I think then it was like 3 years until I saw her again, because she went off and did VCT. But, the grassroots were producing a lot of people that you do still see at this time in tier one, if that's what their aspiration was. And I could sort of see that there was a road paved in a sense that I wanted to follow. So yeah, I cut my teeth in the university scene working with NUL, which is the National University Esports League, NSE, the just National Student Esports. I think that they're sort of stepping on each other's toes in a sense, right? Both running university leagues, but that's where I got my early broadcast experience. Epic LANs, Insomnias, all of the classic UK LAN events that you'd be able to go to as a commentator. Finding that work did involve also doing stuff online through Discords like Broadcast GG. That was a great place to just find voluntary opportunities, basically, to have a reel to say, okay, this is my work, can I join you guys? And I think being part of a university as well at least helped, in the sense that they are usually more preferential towards university students to get in the door and start working in those. But obviously that all moved forwards. I then eventually went from Epic LAN to working tier 3, which was called Beacon at the time, which was the promotion tournament for Valorant. Obviously I do some CS stuff as well, but that's sort of more on the side. But the Valorant story goes from Beacon to then working in the tier 2 level. And then as of this year, I've worked VCT, which is the sort of tier 1 esport for Valorant.
Tier one being the top, of course, right? Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to say, yeah, tier three is sort of like your grassroots, isn't it? And you may have to do voluntary work there. There is a whole debate around, should you work for free? I think there's a balance. I think if you're a student and you're young and you would like to work a couple of events or a week or two, it's good to get that experience. Should you be exploited and work for free for many months? Probably not. But if you're doing it alongside your studies, I worked at a games magazine in Bournemouth, by Bournemouth Uni, throughout my whole third year, but on and off. It'd be like maybe once a month or once every few weeks I'd come in, just write a few features. And that benefited me because I was able to build up a portfolio of work. So you can use that to, like you say, create a show reel. And sorry to interrupt, I just wanted to say, you mentioned Yinsu. So Yinsu is a top host in Valorant Esports, one of the biggest games out there from Riot Games. And she started as a journalist. She would be at the events I was attending. She'd be in the press conferences, in the press room. She'd be writing articles like me. She really wanted to get into hosting, and she started doing the grassroots British Esports student championships for college students. And now she's the top tier host. So I wanted to say as well, even if you start in content creation or something, you are able to meander and move into different fields. You've gone from coaching to casting and done various things. Sorry to interrupt, Harry. Maybe you could tell us more again about, you have a co-caster, don't you? And maybe some of your experiences or any memories that stand out to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I sort of struggled to find a picture where it was just me, to be honest. So, yeah, Cairo is here in spirit. He's my co-caster. Most of the time, as I say, I've done some CS stuff as well, but when it comes to Valorant, he's my main man, my number one guy. So, yeah, we met in the most beautiful of conditions in sunny Dundee up in Scotland, right? But jokes aside, yeah, that was another sort of small event which I had initially got through one of those like online broadcast GG events. It was Wanyu, as they were at the time, now known as SideQuest in London. So they're like they run LAN cafes and stuff, but they were running an online tournament back in sort of 2021. So you still had COVID restrictions and stuff. And yeah, it felt like that point in time was a hotbed for broadcast and sort of pushing through talent quite quickly, I think. And nowadays, where there are sort of less events going along throughout the calendar, I think it is more difficult to get your foot in the door. But to sort of move away from that tangent and focus on Cairo, yeah. So from working with him on that first event, I then made the connection with him, and he's Scottish. You know, as soon as he opens his mouth, it's very obvious. And that was a LAN event which was hosted in Dundee that we went to. That was Scottish Esports League number 4. So yeah, we went and did that, and then we were sort of sat down at the pub afterwards, and he said, would you be my duo? Like, you know, should we maybe work together and do a few more of these? And I said, you know what? Yeah, let's do it. So obviously it was still a hobby at the time. That was one of the first paid opportunities that I had. And sort of, as you mentioned, I think you need to know your own worth as a commentator. I think that's really important. But even things like the university stuff, that's an opportunity to learn how to do invoices and get your first paid work and things like that. But essentially we would always just bounce off each other. We would usually get contacted for the same opportunities, and if we didn't, I would be like, oh well, this is who I usually work with. And that was a way for us to both consistently put our faces on broadcast and continue to move forwards throughout that ecosystem that I mentioned at the start. So in terms of these pictures, I'll stop waffling. Top left is Red Bull Instalock. So all of these are taken within the last year, essentially. Top left is Red Bull Instalock. That was a LAN event in London. Game Changers was, well, it was a Game Changers event. So that's for women and marginalized genders. We did another Instalock this year as well. That was last year. But yeah, they're both women's tournaments. So that was really cool to be part of. I think it's always an absolute privilege to be part of those and really help a scene which also doesn't get many LAN events. So it does really feel like a big moment when those teams come along, especially when we had Shopify from America that time. We had Team Falcons Vega this year from Southeast Asia, and FlyQuest as well from NA. So that was really cool. The next one along, I think maybe the personal highlight, Ascension 2024. So that's the promotion tournament to VCT. That was really, Kyra and I taking our step up, I think, and getting to work in that environment in the Riot Games Arena in Berlin, going through the process of planning to commentate that kind of an event and being around professionals that you've sort of seen a lot and getting the chance to work with them. So that was a really great experience. A little later that year, in the bottom left, that's Red Bull Homeground. So that was then actually commentating those teams at the top level, again, international teams, stuff like that. Being in Berlin once again, working with like such an awesome team that we had there. There was Hang Loose Media that were running that event, but we had like some really long days, best of one, stuff like that, because we were working through the group stage before we had some other commentators come in and do the playoffs. And you really want that team atmosphere within your sort of caster collective, I suppose, to get you through those longer days. I mean, I was speaking with you, Gregan, earlier about some of the like Pokemon events and the longer days and stuff. So yeah, it's really good to have that. And finally, the last one in the bottom right is us on VCT this year, which was a great experience. Not particularly. I think, look, as a commentator, what I would say is, yeah, working with a consistent pair is definitely very beneficial, or at least that's what I found. Having someone that you can rely on. I think there was a big discussion recently about an article posted on HLTV about Anders' experience as a commentator. And sort of how, as someone who'd been in the industry for a very long time without a duo recently and other external factors, he'd sort of found it difficult over a period of months to find work. And I found it to be a really interesting article. And Scrawny had also, another tier 1 talent for Counter-Strike, had sort of said to quote retweeted it and mentioned that his duo, Launders, how he felt that was, we're business partners first and friends second, I think. You wouldn't you would want to work with someone that you would trust to sort of do your business with at the same time, I suppose, I guess. And, you know, because Kyra and I have that experience and we've been working together for 4 years, like I trust him. Do you know what I mean? So we both know what works for us and what doesn't. And I think it's important to have that sense as well, especially when I mentioned earlier stuff like knowing your worth as a commentator and sort of pitching your rate and making negotiations with people and stuff, because those are difficult conversations to have, especially as someone who, you know, maybe you come from the traditional workplace and that's all kind of written out in front of you and stuff, and you're not having to sort of go in and say, okay, this is my price or anything like that, right? So for sure it helps, and he's also, you know, a great friend to me as well. So that is that's really important.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Harry. Just on that note, a lot of commentators, you will work on a freelance basis, right? Even the people that have been at the top for a very long time, like people like Shocks in League of Legends and Counter-Strike, tend to work on a freelance basis, and it is extremely competitive. So before we move on to chatting about your background, Gregan, is there any advice you want to give the audience around navigating that, and also how cutthroat it can be? I've heard from commentators coming to me saying people are nice to your face, Dom, and say, yeah, it's all lovely, and then they'll undercut you with the tournament operators and take the job. You know, is there anything you want to add about that, or the challenges of that? It can be to anyone on the panel.
So I might have had possibly the worst, most cutthroat experience in esports of getting an email about within 10 days of a season starting, where I had been guaranteed a full year pay for the following season, and by email was told, "Oh, we don't think we're going to work with you next season." And I was in a position where it was delayed for at least 3 months, so I'd already been delayed the decision to know I was going to work that. And as a coach who commentates, I was looking for coaching opportunities and denying them on the grounds that I'd already been guaranteed a spot for commentary. So that left me with no work for that season, and it also denied me like a substantial amount of money for the next year, which I'd planned my life around. I started a project, I started a podcast that I knew was going to cost me around 40,000 for the year. So I really wanted to invest in it. And then suddenly the money had to come from my previous earnings, and I had no guaranteed income coming through the next season. And where that was a horrible experience, and like I'm sure other people have had horrible experiences in esports, it's what it then does in the freelance world for you. When you have one or two of those experiences, you don't trust anything ever. I've had times where I've been on the flight to events and haven't signed a contract yet. And you're thinking, am I even going to get paid for this event? And so there is a lot in esports of those kind of tough decisions where you have to trust someone, even though you've got all of these red flags that you've had before. I think it is getting better, and especially in the more established esports. I know in Pokemon it's incredible. We get a season. Like I know when all the events are next season, and I also will know which events I'm casting at least 3 months before the first event, and so like 9 months before the last event, and that's fine. But then it used to be like a week before you'd know if you're casting it or not, and I'm sure you've had experiences like that.
Yeah, similar. I understand the contract one as well. There have been a few times before where you're kind of poking, like, yeah, I kind of want to sign on to this to make sure there's at least some kind of fallback. But even then, in terms of like legal guarantees and things, I think that's where esports does tend to fall short at times, and that's where it would be really nice to see more government support on a player side, you know, just the industry as a whole. Because yeah, I can think of several tournaments I did along that journey where maybe I was left unpaid for a year. Maybe I still haven't seen that money. The company has dissolved or whatever. It happened with the Scottish one, not the first one where we met, but the second one. I did finally see that money thanks to John at Epic Land and other people who sort of helped push for it. Yeah, stuff like that. I mean, even my time in tier 2, right? It's not directly ran by Riot. It's multiple different organizers that do it. And before it was most recently Miss Games, who have been a pleasure to work with. ProMod was where I got my in at that level. And as we know, that was also another company which shut down towards the end of, well, it would have been 2023 at that point. And yeah, I got paid for a few of those, but there was money that I didn't receive. And that is ultimately the nature of this business at times. I think a way to sort of relate to what you said as well about being freelance and wanting to make sure you have that money is that, I'm getting older. I want to move. I want to live I want to rent somewhere, something like that. And when you're then trying to get into these contracts and stuff, it's you say to them like, oh, I have a contract with this person and this person to the end of the year, but ultimately you're still self-employed, you're still a freelancer, and a lot of these places don't want to make that gamble when there's someone else in a similar position that is just, on a salary, for example. So yeah, I don't think no one comes into this industry, or at least you shouldn't come into this industry expecting to be, earning a ridiculous amount of money right out the gate and being, no one should be in it for the money is the point I'm trying to make. It's a hobby first, a passion first, and then you sort of take it from that point onwards.
Can I just add as well? Just want to add before we go to the other panelists, two things I took from that. If you're looking for work and you get offers or you want offers, try and get it in writing. The contracts can be important depending on what it is, but even I would do sponsorship deals for my news site, and if often those would just be agreed on email. If I trusted the person, yeah, Dom, we'll go ahead with that, confirmed for whatever August. As long as you've got it in writing, that can really help you. Contracts are important, right? I haven't been a commentator myself. It's slightly different because you're agreeing to work for a period of time and so on. But get it in writing. And then the other thing you were talking about, companies coming and going. At the semi-pro and the grassroots level, they do a lot. Esports is very top heavy. The fans are most interested in the tier one, the top tier, the world championships, the best players and the best teams. And at that level, there is a little bit more sustainability. I'm not saying there hasn't been job cuts from some of the biggest companies, but if you look to work for a Microsoft and they're doing a Halo tournament, or the Pokemon company, for example, is a great example. The Pokemon company aren't going to disappear tomorrow. It's incredibly unlikely, right? So you want to look for those sort of roles that maybe give you a bit more stability. Is there anything you wanted to add, Affinity, about that, or maybe Joe?
You first, go on.
So with the contracts, it's quite often really sort of idealistic to expect contracts. Like, most places that are offering money, they want the contract for themselves. It's great to have for you, but most organizations want it for themselves. And there's another issue in here, is that a lot of the contracts you sign, especially as a commentator, can be terrifying. I don't know about you. It's like, I'm looking through some of them and it's like, we own everything you do. Any social media post, your likeness, we own it all. If you set on our broadcast, we can do whatever. And especially in a day where sort of deep fakes and AI is so prevalent, there's no protection against that. But if you want the work, sometimes you have to sign these contracts that you're looking over and going, I wouldn't sign this if I didn't really want to do this. And that could be quite scary. And I'm quite lucky that myself and my family have a lot of experience reading over contracts. But if you're coming into this like independently as somebody who doesn't really have that background, it can be just very overwhelming. As you said, you can get them on the flights. I've signed contracts for events after I've done them, which shouldn't be happening. But it's a messy industry a lot of the time. Communication is really weird because sometimes the tournament organizer is hiring out to third party to do production, and then there's miscommunication about who's hiring talent, and then talent has to figure out who's getting the contract, who's paying them between the two of them. It's a very confusing and messy industry legally. In terms of being cutthroat as well, you mentioned that there's a lot of people who do sort of undercut their pay and stuff to get work. There's a lot of people, probably myself included, I probably have undercut my pay unknowingly because finance isn't really talked about in esports. I don't know if you guys can agree, is that I don't really know what I should be charging because no one talks about it. And it's very sort of, nothing in my contract says I can't talk to everybody else and say what I earn, but it's also very, everyone's looking at you like, just don't do it. No one does it. You don't do it. So it's very difficult to understand your worth. We were talking about how much unpaid work you do. There is, if you come into this expecting to, especially in commentary, expecting to be paid upfront early, maybe ESCA teams, if it's sort of a big team in advance, they'll pay, £10, £5 to cast their game. But any work that is, above minimum wage, if you work it out, does not happen for ages. It is a huge slog to even get to paid work in a lot of roles. And that's why, again, passion first has to be. There's a lot of people, less events at the moment, oversaturation in a lot of markets as well. In some esports scenes, there isn't the opportunity to move up in events unless someone, decides to retire, someone gets cancelled or whatever. So there's a lot of stagnation, and that breeds a lot of anger and a lot of drama between people. If somebody gets work, if someone, takes a role that you thought maybe you were shooing for, you'd been gunning for, it can breed a lot of resentment. There's a lot of people that, everyone talks. Like, I'm not going to pretend that everyone talks to some extent, whether it's, sort of catty or whether it's from personal experience and sort of warnings. So it can be a very vicious industry. And I think talent is a great example of that, just because it's so competitive. The sorts of personalities it brings in, a lot of us are quite flamboyant characters, which, can get on a lot of people's nerves quite quickly. When there's limited work, when there's limited money, it's sort of a stewing pot sometimes for a really shark. I've outright been told by like heads of products for events, you need to be a shark. You need to like go after these roles. And I'm like, I don't want to, but sometimes like you're actively being told by people, if you want to do this, you have to be cruel. So if it's an industry coming into, you need to be aware that money is uncomfortable a lot of the time. Freelancers, there are people that you'll go months without being paid, and you just kind of have to accept that. There are times that you just end up having to write the money off, or you have to take it to small claims court. You'll have to deal with people that will do whatever it takes to make it in this industry, which sometimes is necessary, but as long as you come in prepared, it won't catch you off guard, but it can be really tiring, really vicious at times.
Did you want to add anything, Joe?
I mean, I feel like everyone's pretty much said everything on the subject, but like it is pretty much a Wild West, because it's such a new industry compared to other scenes that everyone's still kind of just making things up as they go along and figuring things out. And as you say, like contracts and stuff, no one really teaches you this stuff when you're starting. You're just thrown in the deep end and you kind of learn as you go, really. And like with rates and things like that.
Like how it should be and how it is.
Exactly, yeah. And like, when I started shooting esports events, no one told me what the rate should be. I was just like, oh yeah, okay, that sounds great. And then you sort of, as time goes on, you find out what other people are charging. You're like, oh, okay. And then, over the years, I've sort of gradually increased my rates and no one's said no yet. So I'm like, okay, this is good. But, you still don't really know exactly where it should be, especially with something like this. It's kind of, you almost feel like it's a made-up job sometimes, right? It's just like we're just working in games. It's not a real job, so you almost feel guilty for charging for things. But with contracts and stuff, with photography, myself, I've had cases where I've done an event, not signed a contract, and then a few months later, I won't mention the game, but turned up at to shoot the next event, and like my pictures were in the game, and I was like, oh, that's cool, but that wasn't in the contract kind of thing. Well, there wasn't a contract, and I think they realized they messed up, and they basically just shoved me a bunch of money, just like shut me up. Just like, please don't go to court about this. So yeah, just like things like that. But yeah, it's a bit of a Wild West, to be honest. But yeah, I think you've said everything.
100%. And something I really want to add on that has reminded me, try and find a mentor. How do you know what you're worth? Well, talk to people who have done it and are maybe 5-10 years ahead of you or even more, and ask them what they charged back then, and then you can start to work out roughly. And we talked about some of the volatility of esports and tier 2 esports and tier 1 as well, but I hope it doesn't put you off as well, because the biggest personalities in esports can earn incredibly well. When you look at people like Shocks, for example, as an esports host, Richard Lewis as a journalist, people like that, you can do really well, and you can charge well and have good day rates and so on. Streamers as well. Cadril is one of the biggest streamers at the moment. He's from the UK. His streams get more views than the official League of Legends broadcast. He will be earning incredibly handsomely. So I hope it doesn't put you off. The potential is there, but it is a bit of a fight at times. I'm conscious of time. We're about sort of a little bit over halfway through. I do want to leave time for questions, maybe like 5-10 minutes at the end. So I'll try and whittle through what we've got here. This has decided to. There we go. Now Cal isn't here, so you can have to imagine pictures of Gregan in his Rocket League days and on the Pokemon stage and so on. But Gregan, maybe you can talk a bit about how you went from what you were doing in Rocket League to coaching, at David Beckham's organisation, Guild Esports, and other organisations, to casting. How do you get into that?
It actually started before Rocket League. So I was part of a Minecraft build team called the Nox Crew back in 2012, I think it was. Everyone was doing it for a passion. It was literally gaming when I came in turned into like working for the Nox Crew. Even though it wasn't work, I was building stuff in the game. And they used to go to Insomnia Gaming Festival, which was 3 times a year at the time. And basically, it was a chance for the small amount of money that Nox Crew made to give back to everyone. You know, they'd pay for a little bit of comforts at the events and meals, things like that. And then we'd get a free pass into the event, and it was a great opportunity to network. I met a lot of connections through that. And then consequently, Rocket League came out during that 4th or 5th Insomnia Gaming Festival that I was at. And I ended up commentating it as a guest commentator in the final with 2 friends, because at the time I was better at Rocket League than everyone who was playing on the stage, and knew more about Rocket League than the 2 commentators. So like, we'll get you in as a guest commentator. I'd done a bit of public speaking. I'd done a few panels about Minecraft, and they were like, you did a pretty good job here, so why don't you go and look for work in Rocket League? And at the time, it was an indie game still. There was no competitive scene. So a lot of the work was just, hey, have you got a computer that can stream it? And you were essentially streaming the game, commentating the game, updating the overlays, doing everything for free, because there was no money in it. And the money that was there would go to the winner for like £100 or something. So I did that for hours and hours and hours. And I won't lie to you, I had to retake the year of university because I was spending too much time doing this kind of thing. And eventually got more and more opportunities. And I'll be honest, compared to some of the journeys here, I feel like you guys have grinded from the grassroots. I took some big leaps that got me huge opportunities. So after a bit of Rocket League time, there was then Clash Royale were doing their first ever esports season. They were looking for the way they described it was a young British straight out of college guy. So consequently, I got the opportunity to host the first season of Clash Royale, having never played the game before. And I called a minion in the interview a flying teapot, because I said, I don't know what anything's called. And they said, just commentate it. You can learn that later. And I just did it with absolute confidence and just hoped that they didn't mind I didn't know the names. And they took a punt on it, and I flew out to LA and commentated Clash Royale for about a month and a half out there. And when I was at that, I met Team Vitality and said, hey, if you guys ever want a Rocket League team, I'll help you out with that. And then a month or 2 later, they say, we've got a load of money through a big sponsor, which was Renault Sport. Would love for you to find us a team. And I'm sure they won't mind me saying, it was like £200 to scout a team for the biggest budget European Rocket League team at the time. And I scouted this team, made a document, did loads of research for them, connected them with the players, and they said, we like the way you work. Do you want to come and manage the project? So what I'm trying to say is sometimes it's those lucky journeys, those lucky breaks. And you could say there's a lot of networking that led to that. You know, I met the right people at the right times, the right connections, and then consequently just got in the door and then showed what I could do. And then from the Team Vitality project, you know, winning the World Championship, I remember Neo, the founder of Vitality, saying to me, you've made it now. So anything you want to do, you've always got that on your CV that you're a world champion. And that's sort of the thing with esports. Once you hit that tier 1 credential, you can then take that forward and find other jobs. A lot of amazing commentators, pro players, coaches now work behind the scenes because they've got that CV to show it. So that's sort of my journey, and a lot of the coaching side and the commentary side just comes from a background of what I was interested in at school. I never studied specifically for esports or gaming. I was studying medicine at university, but whilst I was at university, I was coaching sport. I was involved in the sports side of university because there wasn't esports at the time, really. And then before that, the public speaking side, I did a lot of public speaking at school. I did a lot of talks during my school time, and then also a lot at university too. So the skills that I end up using in the industry were skills that I'd developed through extracurricular things I'd done throughout the journey. And that's sort of where you mentioned earlier, find something you're good at. If it's accounting, but you're interested in esports, you can combine those 2 things together. And if there is an accountancy job at an esports organization, your interest plus your skill set might be the key combination that they're looking for. And then that's where you can do that work experience. You can reach out to an accountant at an esports org and be like, hey, would it be all right if I did a week's work experience here? So that's sort of the mindset shift that I think a lot of people are starting to take now, is find what you're good at, find your skill set. And if the right opportunity in esports comes up, to find that job, that could be the way you combine it. And I've just been lucky enough that it was 2 passions I had of coaching and supporting alongside public speaking that led to that.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Gregan. I'm going to try and race through because I know we're up against it here. So next, Affinity, maybe you want to talk a bit about, I know you wanted to talk about women in esports, the diversity side of things, maybe like, what it's like studying an esports degree course. There's so much you could talk about, your background and so on. And I will just say before I pass the mic over, I've seen, I've given talks at universities and so on, and I do notice that the students who put themselves forward to do events and juggle their studies at the same time are the ones that will do well. You've built up a good brand for yourself in that time, and you're only just about to graduate, right? So you please tell us about that, Leyna.
So the subject of university esports degrees is very, very hotly debated, and I agree it should be. I think it should definitely be debated with a bit more of an open mind sometimes. But I want to talk a bit about my experience just because clear up some misconceptions and talk about how it's an alternative route in, but by far not the only route. So far from the only route as to be untrue. I initially didn't want to do university. I actually wanted to do cybersecurity, wanted to go into a degree apprenticeship at best, but just pretty much into the workforce. My friends wanted to go to what was Staffordshire University at the time, now University of Staffordshire, to study games design. One was already there. My other friend who was in my year was looking to go. I felt a little bit left out because it was all they were talking about. I decided I'd try Be a Good Friend. I'd have a look, see if I could find something to talk to them about. Stumbled across the fact they had an esports course. I was like, well, that's curious. And this is all during lockdown because I was doing A-levels 2020, 2021. So I was like, I don't really want to. I don't know what I want to do next. I don't know what the world's going to look like. Saw this, figured, you know what, I'll get my parents off my back. That was the main one. I wanted to move out. I didn't want to live with my parents. My parents wanted me to do university. I don't think they had this in mind, and they weren't best pleased when I first selected it. They've come around to it recently, though. And so I went for an open day. I saw the facilities, which is the one in the middle, which isn't actually in operation anymore, bottom middle, sorry, with the blue and the red stereotypical esports. And I saw the lecturer's passion. I had a look at what they were actually teaching, and I figured, yeah, I'd get to move out, I'd get to experience university, and I think at the end of the day, these Mickey Mouse degrees, I think anyone that is pursuing further education shouldn't be put down for wanting to be more educated, regardless if it's a hyper niche subject, if it's something that's not going to exist in 3 years. I think anybody that's looking to be more educated should be encouraged. And so I went for this knowing might not have anything come of it. I want to do community management during the first couple of months. Went to an esports event, somehow managed to swindle speaking to Banks, the host at an event in Copenhagen. And speaking to him, watching him, I saw a role that I thought I would absolutely love and threw myself into that. And so alongside the course, the lecturers were really good, making sure that you had all of the time that you needed to. If I needed to miss a lecture to, I missed one to fly to the HLTV Awards. I think I sent my lecturers a photo of me having done an escape room with Hunden as my, here's what I got out of this. So I had the ability to throw myself into freelancing and getting experience alongside studies. And the studies were amazing as well because it gave me a different avenue. So it was a lot of, academics. I was being taught by 3 people with doctorates in vaguely esports related things. So 2 of my lecturers had done a lot of research into MOBAs and community and how video games bring people together like that. So I was being taught the academic side of things, which gave me the basis that you get from other degrees with having to write literature reviews and stuff. And then I also got access to it recently open, and I know you've seen it as well, is top there, right along the top, is the new Esports Arena and broadcasting studio. £3 million worth of industry standard, if not better, equipment, which as a student, there's a lot of, is it worth the money? I get access to £3 million equipment where I can learn to do any role pretty much that I would want in broadcasting. There's, EVS, which is the highest level of replay operating pretty much, vision mixing, audio, lighting, and then alongside that, students want to run events. There's always events being run, so you can do, social media for that. It gave myself and loads of students just the opportunity to be in a proper formal studio, which, as Hazza can say, there's a lot of online work to actually get to the point where you're in front of a desk with proper producers in your ears and a whole team, lighting, runs of shows that you have to worry about. Sometimes it can take a lot of time, and when you get there, it can be a lot initially, but being able to go into an industry standard studio off the bat is worth all of the money that I've spent on the degree. I've got to do some really cool events. I've got to meet some really cool people. Industry events are coming in and letting students work on them. So we've had sort of Halo events coming in. We've got a COD event later in the year. UKEL. I've done my own. I ran a award ceremony, and there's been examples of this course actually, having the facilities and the opportunity to learn being useful. A lot of people go into sort of lecturing and teaching. Two of my friends who graduated 2 years ago, they are the heads of esports for Alpine. And they get to go to all of the events abroad. Like my friend will send me events and be like, look, where I'm at today. And I'm like, how have you swindled getting to France? So I think it's becoming more and more valid as the courses are learning what skills are necessary. They're contacting people in industry and going, what skills do you want to see people have? What can we teach best? And it's by far not the only route. And I don't think it will ever be the only route. No one is saying we want someone with an esports degree. It's just getting a degree, having education, so that if you want to go into a separate field, you can say, look, I did do university. Even if it's nothing relevant, you did university. And it gives you access to facilities and to contacts. Like we have a partnership with Epic Land at Staffs, which means a lot of students go and they commentate, which is a huge stepping stone for a lot of people. So it's been great for those connections and for that experience. But yeah, I know it's hotly debated, but the course teaches academics, it teaches a wide range of things, and there's a lot of practical that comes with it. So I wouldn't be writing off for anyone that was like looking at wanting to do university and was hesitant about it. Is absolutely worth a look.
Just lastly, it's all right. Keep the mic. We'll go. We mentioned women's esports.
I could do a quick overview. NSC Valorant finals, yes. There's definitely imbalances still in esports, and you see it in players, and you see it in the pro level. There is still a distinct lack of diversity in a lot of esports titles. Valorant, which Riot had a huge focus from the get-go at promoting inclusivity and cracking down a lot on toxicity. But you look at other esports that have been around a lot longer, like Counter-Strike, is you look at the top level, you look at the demographic of the players, there isn't really much of a demographic. And a lot of that stems from the games. It's getting a lot better now with women's initiatives and stuff. But there always feels like there's a lot more that you have to prove as a woman who plays video games, as a woman who works in them. Is not only do you have to prove, that you deserve, because it's a mishmash industry. Like loads of people have come in from all over the show. Like it is a group of misfits making something cool. But as a woman, you've got to prove that not only do you have the skills to be there, but that women sometimes, because there's not a lot of women that do it. There's not a lot of people to look up to. It's getting better. Like Valorant's got amazing. You've got Pansy, you've got Yinsu, you've got Winterio. There's so many people to look to that are doing this. But in the production side of things, there still really isn't. So these women's initiatives have been really helpful in trying to promote, especially players, and just the acceptance of women in what was a very masculine-dominated sort of hobby field. And the more that we can make women feel comfortable playing, the more that we can make people feel like this is something they want to be involved in, the more we're going to see people who have, the skills to play in tier one, the skills to want to work on these higher level broadcasts and stuff. And there's a lot of discrimination you face. As a caster, you get a lot of slack for anything. If you criticize, even if it is the most spot on criticism, it could be a 13-0. If you criticize the team that got no rounds and did nothing right at all, there's going to be someone in chat that's a diehard fan that's like, no, don't. Stop commentating. What do you know? As a woman, you get that side of things, and then you get the comments on looks, and you get the women belong in the kitchen and all of that as well. So you have to deal with the double whammy of like the hate you get for doing the role and for saying what you say, and the people that have preconceived opinions coming into it, which can be very taxing at time. I refuse to cast with Twitch chat open just because I know I'm going to see stuff that I don't want to see, and that'll throw me off, and I shouldn't have to. It's getting a lot better, but diversity in the industry is still taking a while to make it feel inclusive enough for people to want to. You never want to force that. You don't want to be we want 50-50 men and women. You want to make sure that you have an environment where women feel they can come into it and want to come into the industry, and that have the same opportunities to do so. And sometimes that requires extra pipelines, extra funding for things like VCT Game Changers. We're seeing results. We had Fluorescent was playing on Apex for a while, which who knows if that would have been possible without that as a stepping stone. A lot of it is the societal issues that we have to overcome. But it's getting better. There's a lot of work to do, but there's some really cool people to look up to out there as well. So yeah, it's a mess. It's getting better. It has to be a mess, and it has to have people. And unfortunately, it'll have to be men that make the difference. It will never be a woman standing up going, "Women's esports is worth you watching." It has to be other people. Like ESL Impact Finals had Sponge and Machine casting it. More people are going to want to watch it because they are casting it, and they say, like, Alicia's girlfriend plays in the scene. More people are going to want to watch the scene because he has said so than because she has. But it's getting there. It's a really cool industry. But if you're coming into it as somebody who is, queer, neurodiverse, of color, a woman, you do have to sort of expect that it's still a work in progress.
I agree in that. I agree with that as well. And what you're saying again as well about some of the men, if they're covering the tournament, and actually, if you look at women's football, Ian Wright is a big advocate of that, and there's been some pushback and criticism from the community towards him saying you're stopping a woman getting a job in the role, but he is also doing a lot of advocacy work as well. So there's a hard balance to strike. I need to say sorry to Joe because Joe, have put you here at the end, but some fantastic photos you've taken. Maybe you could tell us, Joe, as I go through a bit about, maybe some of the stories behind the photos or how you got into esports photography.
Can I say?
Yeah, go on.
So there's one thing I want to say about Joe, which is when you turn up to an event as talent, players or coaches, there's a few photographers in the industry that you're hoping are there. And I can name two in my head that I always hope are there, and Joe is one of them. Like Joe's taken some of my favorite pictures of myself, and also I think one of the things that's really nice for you, Joe, is you have a great relationship with so many of the players and the coaches and everything. So that means they're working with you, which is something that's so special. And I think that definitely comes from your background. But sorry, I don't want to take away from you, but I just wanted to give a bit of context if he downplays his experience.
What a gentleman. Thank you. I've actually got a mug at home with a picture of Gregan on it. I won't tell you that story, but it's one of my favourite mugs. But my whole career has basically just been one big happy accident, to be honest. I was originally a music photographer touring the world with bands, which was a whole nother life, which was amazing and good fun. Never thought I could make a career out of gaming and esports. Always been a huge gamer myself. Grew up playing games and played a lot of Counter-Strike and Call of Duty and all that kind of stuff. And used to watch esports online, but never thought, oh yeah, that's something I could work in. And then a friend of mine was actually going to review G3 in London in 2014, and they had a spare press pass. And they were like, oh, do you want to come along and take some pictures for my article? And I was like, yeah, that sounds fun. There was like Counter-Strike, Call of Duty, StarCraft 2, and FIFA was at this event, which was really cool. And so yeah, went along, shot the event, sent the pictures off, had a great time, and thought, that was that. Moved on with my life and didn't even think, oh, that's something I could pursue. And then about 2 or 3 months later, Gfinity, the company that put that event on, they reached out and they were like, hey, we saw your pictures from that event. We're building an esports arena in London. Would you be interested in shooting our events? And I was like, blimey, that sounds pretty cool. Like, yeah, absolutely. But I was still touring at the time. So I was kind of, flipping between touring, and then when I got home, I was shooting the esports events. But at the time, I'd kind of burnt out on touring a little bit, and I was enjoying the esports stuff just way more. It was a new industry. It was really, because it was so early days then, it was like 2014, 2015. There wasn't really like a bar or like anyone else to look up to. So I was just literally making it up as I went along, pretty much. And apparently people liked my pictures, and one thing led to another, and it just kind of snowballed, really. And it got to the point where I was just getting enough esports work that I ended up quitting touring and just focusing on esports. And I shoot about 40, 45 events a year now. Yeah, it's favorite. So, funnily enough, this one right here, this was quite special for me because this was 2016 Katowice, actually, which I think they've rest in peace Katowice. They just announced that. But yeah, so that was the first esports event I went to where it was just a huge arena, like thousands and thousands of people all singing like a football match. It was crazy. I think that was when the penny kind of dropped for me. Like, oh my goodness, this is serious. This is crazy. And that was during the final. And I got that photo of Oliver Meister in Fnatic, and that picture kind of like raised my career quite a lot. For some reason, that picture went really viral online.
It's legendary. A legendary photo.
Oh, thank you, very kind. Thank you. And Fnatic actually printed that on a mouse mat as well. And yeah, so I owe a lot to that picture and that event. So, you know, I've shot bigger events since then, but that one's still dear to my heart because it kind of propelled me to another level. And but yeah, you kind of touched on the uni thing. For photography, I'd just like to say I think a photography degree is not worth doing. I never went to university personally, but with photography specifically, you can learn all of the stuff yourself. You can learn it on YouTube. You can just go out with your camera, trial and error. That's how I learned. But the stuff they don't teach you, you know, like how to send invoices, how to do contracts, all that stuff. That's the stuff that I think is worth studying. So, you know, maybe do a business degree or a marketing degree or something like that, or an esports degree. But yeah, in my particular industry, I think a photography degree is not worth doing. You can learn that yourself. But yeah.